most of us have had some type of experience where we partied a little bit too hard and done something stupid, like lost a phone, or maybe said something to hurt someone that you love, and you wake up in the morning and you feel ashamed and embarrassed and anxious. But for most people, that's a feeling that just blows over, happens once in a while. For me, I got to a point where literally every single time that I drank, regardless of if it was 2 beers, 3 beers, and nothing bad happened, I still felt that way every single time. And that got to be so much for me that I knew I had to reevaluate my relationship with all substances. But I wasn't really sure how I could pull that off. I mean, it's not something that you can go on Google, take a 5-minute quiz, and have an answer. So I really had to look at the whole journey and look within. Now, for me, it all started in high school, grade 9 specifically. It's funny because most kids are looking forward to the first day of high school. You know, it's a fresh start. But me, not so much. I was terrified. And the reason for that was I was just coming to terms with my sexuality as a gay man, and I knew that it was obvious and kids are vicious. Sure enough, on the first day of school, none of my straight male friends spoke a word to me ever again. Still true to this day. And as a kid that age, I just wanted what every kid wants. They want to be accepted and they want to be cool. So I became cool, then I became a badass bitch. I started, I started smoking weed and drinking and smoking cigarettes, and I was really relieved because when I did that, I found I made friends, and it was easy. And so I think that was why I started clinging to alcohol and weed, but by second semester, that's what everyone was doing. And so I started to get a little bit bored, and I decided that I should do some experimenting. So throughout high school, I tried all different kinds of drugs. At that point, it wasn't that bad, and I made it through high school, skipping classes by day and smoking weed by night. Well, smoking it by day too, hence the skipped classes. But I made it through, and after that, I moved back in with my mom and my stepdad. We moved to Burlington, and that was really good for my mental health because I was back on the right track, I was with my family, and I was disciplined, I was eating healthy, I wasn't really drinking, partying. Things were looking up, so I thought maybe I'm gonna be okay going forward. Sadly, I was mistaken because that seed had already been planted. It just hadn't sprouted yet. But it did. It sprouted pretty much as soon as I moved to Toronto in 2014. Within the first month, I've already had my first mental breakdown. It was Pride Month, and I had spent that entire week partying, drinking, doing all kinds of drugs, and by the time I got to the end of that week, I had a really hard crash, and that was devastating for my mental health. I remember calling one of my good friends and explaining to them how I wanted to call my mom or my dad and tell them that I had a problem and I needed to move home right away. Not a bad idea in retrospect, but obviously that didn't happen because I had that voice back and it was telling me that you had just moved to Toronto, it was your first Pride in the city, and so you lived a little, it's not a big deal. And so that was the answer that I went with. I swept it under the rug, and I didn't treat it as a big deal. But I think deep down, I kind of always knew that it was a big deal. And it became a bigger and bigger deal as time went on. And it was hard because I had always tried to justify my substance use based on the fact that I hadn't done things like been put in jail or I wasn't on the streets. My family still loved me. I hadn't been left by a partner because of it. But when I was thinking about it, contemplating and trying to arrive at a decision for how to handle my substance abuse, I realized that that justification didn't really make sense. because, well, I got to thinking, if you know somebody who they're an alcoholic and maybe their husband left them, they weren't an alcoholic because their husband left them because they were an alcoholic. So that hit me like a ton of bricks, because in that moment I realized that I had been putting myself on this pedestal, standing above all of my fellow addicts, no matter what stage of their addiction they were in. And the only thing that stood between my position and any of those positions that we see addicts portrayed as in the media and in movies was just one slip up. And that could be me. And so that hit me really hard. And I started thinking that I didn't want to be pushing down people that were really part of the same group as I was, because I don't know, it just didn't feel fair. There's a stigma surrounding addiction, but it doesn't encapsulate everybody. And I, as an addict, was helping to allow that to happen. In fact, I was using it to make me feel better about myself. And that made me feel horrible, and I had to do something about that, but I didn't really know what I could do. I mean, like I said, I can stand here and I can say I've never been to jail, hospitalized, or any of that stuff, but what I can't do is stand here and tell you guys that I haven't been this close to all of those situations multiple times in the past decade. And I didn't know when I would end up in that position. It could be one more drink away, 10 years away, or it might never happen. But when I have so many people that are supporting me and looking out for me and just also wanting the best for myself, I knew that I couldn't continue to allow that to be my life. I wouldn't hit rock bottom, and I didn't want to become a stereotype. So I had to really look within myself, and in contemplating that, I realized something. I spent all this time trying to figure out, am I an alcoholic? Am I a drug addict? Am I a cokehead? Am I this? Am I that? And then I realized that I didn't need to make a decision that would tell me if I was any of those things. I just needed to make a decision that would guarantee for me and my friends and family that I wouldn't be that. And so there was only one thing that I could do, and that was to stop completely. Because, you know, the alcoholic wife who was left by her husband, in a way, I mean, it's horrible, but for me, I never had any of that happen to me, but instead I had to stand there and hurt people that I cared about and have them in front of me and not walk away. And that is equally hard, knowing that you could be responsible for robbing somebody else of their self-worth and their integrity. And so I think when I realized that was when I knew I just had to stop altogether. And to be honest, when I had my last drink, I didn't even know that it was my last drink. I was planning to reevaluate my relationship with drugs and alcohol, but I was never planning to give it up. After all, I was an addict, so I liked it. But it was the only way, and since then, this was 106 days ago now, so you know, it's still pretty fresh, and when I tell people that I'm sober, the first thing they ask me is, how long has it been? And to be honest, I stopped keeping track on the daily because in my new mindset, it doesn't matter if my last drink was yesterday or a year ago. Sobriety for me is it's a personal choice and it's a mindset, and it's not defined by time, it's defined by me. So I'm happy to have my individuality back, and it's a pleasure to be standing up here in front of all of you as the very proudly sober man that I've become. Thank you.